Welcome to Behind the Music, the Houston Chamber Choir's weekly podcast. I'm St. John Flynn.
In this episode, we're joined by Brian Cook, who is Director of Choral Activities at Briar Cliff University in Sioux City, Iowa. And he was the first ever Houston Chamber Choir Choral Conducting Intern in the 2018-2019 season. Brian, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with you, St. John, and with the Chamber Choir community.
And where are you right now?
I am coming to you from Sioux City, Iowa. This is my office, and I am at Briar Cliff University, where I teach choral ensembles and conducting courses.
Now, I mentioned that you were the first ever conducting intern with the Houston Chamber Choir. Tell us about that program. What was it involved? What did it involve, and what was that experience like for you?
Boy, it was a career jump starter for sure. My experience with the chamber choir began with Bob Simpson. He reached out to my professor, Dr. Betsy Cook-Weber, and invited applications for the position at the chamber choir. I was able to go and interview with Bob and with Miriam. And it was just a fantastic experience from the very beginning. Such a warm welcome, a very just genuine atmosphere to work in. And it was wonderful to get to know the singers. My responsibilities with the chamber choir included both artistic responsibilities as well as administrative responsibilities. And I had the great pleasure to conduct the choir. I think in almost every performance, Bob would allow me to take a piece from the ground up, and I was able to rehearse the piece with the singers, and then take it to the concert and perform it in the concert with the choir, which was just a remarkable experience. And then behind the scenes, I had the great privilege to speak or to work rather with Miriam in the office. And of course, the main thrust of my work there was with the Houston Chamber Choir Youth Ambassadors.
And I should say that Miriam is Miriam Kilili, who is the managing director of the choir. You were studying, at the time, you were studying for your DMA, for your doctorate at the Moore School of Music under Dr. Betsy Cook-Weber. And you were involved with some of the Moore School choirs, weren't you? Particularly, I think, the men's choir?
That's correct, yes.
What was it like going from a university ensemble like that to a professional ensemble like the Houston Chamber Choir?
You know, it was an interesting adjustment. It was my first time conducting a professional ensemble. The level of singers that we were working with was far beyond anything that I had worked with before. And it really helped me understand, okay, I can start from this place instead of from another place, and we can proceed from that point forward. And it was just, it was kind of my first wake-up call.
But I mean, a tremendous learning opportunity, a tremendous realization of what those differences are and how you could proceed as a conductor.
Absolutely. And you begin to, as a conductor, you begin to think of things that maybe with other ensembles you wouldn't be able to do, or you wouldn't maybe think that you could get to that level or to that point, but you begin to be a little bit more judicious in what you ask for. You become a little bit more, you dream a little bit bigger, well, maybe we could do it this way. I'll bet these singers can pull that off. And sure enough, I mean, anything I asked from the chamber choir, they were able to just take it and run with it. And so much of what they did just came intuitively. And it really was unlike anything that I've ever conducted before.
Also, you got to conduct the choir, as you said, in every performance throughout that season. including Christmas at the Villa, that wonderful
Yes.
Christmas tradition at the Villa de Metel. What was that experience like? Because that is such a awe-inspiring venue, isn't it?
Oh, it is amazing. And we had the opportunity, that performance, to work with the Apollo Chamber Ensemble. And I had the privilege of conducting a piece that included that quartet. And I also had the privilege, that concert, of conducting my own piece that I had arranged, an arrangement of Sing We Now of Christmas. And it was so wonderful to be able to bring that arrangement to life with an ensemble, with the likes of the chamber choir. And that setting is just so intimate and so gorgeous. It's truly one of the best venues to sing in the Houston area.
Now, you were working with some of the Moore School of Music ensembles, and under the tutelage, really, of Dr. Betsy Cook-Weber, who is on the faculty at the Moore School. She's also the choral director, the chorus director for the Houston Symphony. And she has led certainly the Moore School Concert Chorale to international awards. I mean, they've traveled all over, and you have been part of that. What, though, did you learn from Robert Simpson, the artistic director of the Houston Chamber Choir? Because it is a different setting, as you said. You're moving from a highly qualified university ensemble to a professional ensemble. What did you learn from Bob?
From Bob, I learned so much. First and foremost, musical ideas, musical vision. It was so wonderful to watch him and observe him. I just would set up camp in the back of the rehearsal, and I had my scores out in front of me, and I would try to, as Bob was working, I would be listening to the choir, and I would play this game with myself where I would say, okay, if I was up in Bob's position right now, what would I be addressing, or what would I be, where would I stop? What would I rehearse? And so often I thought that he was going to go one way, and something to me that I thought needed help. And it turns out that he had another plan. And when I went home and would reflect on that, I could see the wisdom in why he addressed one thing and not the thing that I was hearing, for example.
Mm-hmm.
But more than that, I learned how to be a genuine person. Bob is just so warm and kind. And I learned how the tenacity that Bob has. I remember some rehearsals scratching my head and wondering, boy, are we going to be able to pull this off? And Bob would just plow right on, and with the vision and with the determination, and he would inspire those singers. And sure enough, the performances they always just went off without a hitch. And that vision and that tenacity to seek for excellence, no matter how you're feeling today, or no matter what the conditions may be, is it raining outside, or whatever it may be, the tenacity to just push forward and do it for the music and for the love of music was definitely one of the biggest lessons that I learned with Bob.
Getting a bit technical, I suppose, but humor me. With Bob, what did you learn about, I guess in orchestral conducting, they call stick technique. And of course, most choral conductors don't use a baton. What did you learn from Bob in terms of actually being in front of the choir?
I've learned from Bob that when you're in front of the choir, you need to know exactly what it is, what that aural picture of the sound is that you want. I remember him often stopping to fix intonation that to my ears was pretty good. But it was one of those things where the longer I watched Bob work, and the more that I heard him rehearse with the ensemble, the more I was able to hear more of the things that he was hearing. I'm not sure that I ever heard everything that he heard, but I really felt as though he had a way of working with that ensemble in terms of the intonation and the aural picture of what he had uh, in his mind, and how he was going to achieve that goal.
So what do you think you've taken? What are the big lessons that you've taken from that internship with the chamber choir to Briar Cliff University?
The biggest lesson, I would say, is the professionalism, the need to be prepared for every rehearsal, the need for each singer to know their part, the need for every singer to use the very best technique that they know. And these are applicable no matter what choir I'll work with in my future, whether it's here at Briar Cliff or anywhere else. Having the opportunity to work with the creme de la creme is life-changing, because it shows you what musicians are capable of doing. And so now, armed with that knowledge, I'm able to go forward and inspire, hopefully, my own students towards a greater professional end, and help them become even better musicians.
You studied for your bachelor's degree in music education at Brigham Young University, Idaho. And then you taught high school. And then you came to the University of Houston, to the Moore School of Music, to work on your master's in choral conducting and then your doctorate in choral conducting. So you've worked sort of all the iterations, really. You've got
Yes.
High school ensemble, university ensembles, and professional ensembles. When you look back on your years as a high school choir director, what stands out most in your mind about that experience?
The students stand out in my mind. You know, we get into this business, I think, a lot because we're people persons, we're people, and we enjoy the opportunity to make an impact on other people's lives, and we do that through our art, through the music, through the performances, through the events, the galas, the opportunities to interact with a cultural association. We do it because we love people, we love our communities, and I just remember my students from my years teaching high school, and the wonderful performances we had. I was in charge of producing the school musical, and was in charge of doing all of the choreography, the technical issues, the teaching the music, directing the orchestra, building the set. I mean, you name it. And I would hire people to come in and help me accomplish that whole project. But you know, working that closely with young people was just always a great passion of mine, and one that I hope to continue even as I move on to collegiate level teaching. I think that it all begins in the secondary schools and really the elementary schools, if we want to be frank. So being able to work with the students is just a great passion of mine.
What were some of the musicals that you put on?
Well, we put on, my favorite was the Pirates of Penzance, which some may not actually put in the musical category. But if you know the piece by Gilbert and Sullivan, it is just delightful from beginning to end. And I remember approaching that year that we performed the Pirates of Penzance, and it is pretty vocally demanding on a few characters in particular. And you know, I went through the score and I studied the work, and I thought, oh, I think I have a Mabel. Oh, I think I have a Pirate King, and I think I have, and I just started to see, wow, I think I could put this on. And it just was such a joy, such a funny show, full of twists and turns, and I just loved it.
What did the students think of it? Because it must have been a sort of a cultural revelation for them, not just in terms of era, but also heritage, because it's British rather than American, rather than Broadway.
That's correct. Yeah, and when your neighboring high schools are doing things like you know, Hairspray and High School Musical,
the Light and the
Shrek,
Piazza, and yeah,
you know, and then they say, "What are you doing?" And they say, "We're doing the Pirates of Penzance." You know, I think the first thing other people think is Pirates of the Caribbean, and which is quite different. And so, but I'll say that every choice that I made as an educator was with a pedagogical goal in mind. And so, you know, I didn't choose a musical or repertoire for that matter in my choir ensembles. I didn't choose a musical based on what was in vogue or what I thought maybe the kids would really like to do. I chose musicals that I thought would have an instructional purpose behind them. For example, the Pirates of Penzance has no spoken dialogue, or if there is, it's very little. And the whole thing is sung from beginning to end. And I thought it was a great opportunity to reinforce the technique that I was trying to teach in the classroom. I thought it was a great opportunity to speak about operettas and to kind of introduce that idea. We had surtitles at the top of this proscenium so that the audience could, you know, follow along with the storyline, and it was a great opportunity to introduce that. I remember there's a few scenes where there's an offstage chorus when the pirates are coming in to storm the castle, and we set up a video relay to the back to one of our TV screens in the back, so that the students who were singing in the back could see my conducting, and everything would come together, which is what they do in the professional world. So it was a really great opportunity to expose my students to some of those aspects of musical production or dramatic productions that you may not see when you are doing other shows, you know, The Music Man or Oklahoma or things like that.
I think one thing that a lot of people might not appreciate is that when you're conducting an ensemble like the Houston Chamber Choir, there is very much a sense of theatricality involved in those performances. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it's entertainment, and nobody wants to buy a ticket to go and see a boring choir, no matter how good the choir might sound. And what I loved about the performances, particularly think of, you know, Miller Outdoor Theater and the performances that we would do there. We also did the Menotti, with some of the dancers, and you know, there is a very, you know, you're telling a story. You are this music comes with text and with words that we need to convey the message of, and so yes, you very much have to be involved with your face, with your whole body, and you need to communicate the message of the piece, much like you would if you were an actor on a stage.
Let's go back to the beginning. Where does your musical story begin? You were born in Denver, the Denver area in Colorado. Were you part of a musical family?
Yes, I was. My mother began teaching me piano lessons when I was about, I'd say, you know, 4 or 5. When you
Wow.
begin learning to recognize letters and start learning how to read a little bit. She taught piano. Boy, she must have had 30, 35, 40 students some years.
wow.
And the piano was just always busy. Before school, she would teach 2 or 3 lessons. After school, she was always teaching till, you know, 6 o'clock at night, and dinner was in the oven, and she'd, you know, finish her lessons, and then we'd eat together. My father studied music as a minor in college, and he for the first 14 years of my life, he was the conductor of a community choir in the Denver area. And they accomplished quite a bit for a community choir, singing at the Mahler Fest in Boulder, and collaborating with community orchestras and other ensembles throughout the state of Colorado. And so, I kind of grew up going to those concerts and watching him walk down the aisle in his tuxedo, and it was just, I look back at it now and I think, yeah, I think that had a major influence on who I became. When I was in second grade, my parents saw an ad in the paper because we used to get newspapers delivered to our door. And the ad was for auditions to sing in the Colorado Children's Chorale. And so they signed me up for an audition. I was always singing around the house and, had a tune in my head. And I have to say that that as a member of the Colorado Children's Chorale, that experience, probably more than any other experience that I can pinpoint, had a direct influence on who I became as a musician. I entered in the second grade. I sang soprano 1 from second grade through 8th grade. And then at 8th grade, you graduate out of the chorale. With that ensemble, we had opportunities to tour to Taiwan and South Korea, England, France, Brazil, and collaborate with artists at the Aspen Music Festival, and with many of the operas. The chorale actually began as an opera, children's chorus for an opera. And so we had strong ties with the opera companies in the Denver area, and I performed in a few of those. Working with the Colorado Symphony Orchestra, Marin Alsop, who was the conductor at the time, and just being exposed, singing for presidents, former presidents, for religious leaders, the Dalai Lama, the Pope, these kinds of experiences as an elementary school or middle schooler just really have a profound impact on your life, no matter who you become. And so, following the chorale, I was able to work with them as a high school student, and would be in charge of a lot of the administrative or, logistical things like setting up risers or, setting out the water or the snack or whatever it may be. I remember traveling with them as a high school student to England, where we performed at the proms in Royal Albert Hall.
Really?
And, yes, with the South End Boys Choir, nonetheless. And it was just so wonderful to, so many different experiences that I was exposed to, that I look back now and I know without a doubt that that's when I became, that was the beginnings of who I became as a musician. So it was just a great area to be in.
Was there ever any doubt that when you went to college, you were going to be a music major?
Actually, yes. When I entered college, I don't know that anybody had ever told me about being a major in anything. And so when I think when I put my application in for college, I liked to talk to people and things, and I put down a communications major. I didn't know. Of course, I was enrolled in one of the choir classes on campus, one of the ensembles, and so I show up the first week to college, and I'm enrolled in some communication courses, but I'm also enrolled in the choir. And it hit me after like the first week in school. I was like, what am I doing? Like, I want to be a musician. I was so inspired by my mentors at BYU, Idaho. And I said, that's who I want to be. I don't, enough of the communications business. I want to get back, in music. So I don't think that it was intentional. I never had to think in my brain, like, what do I want to be? But it was kind of a fluke that I signed up to be a communications major, when really all along my passion and my love was in music.
Musical communication.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Right. You, when you graduated, you went on to teach high school I think in the Denver area. And then you decided to go back to school to do graduate work. Why did you decide on conducting, choral conducting?
Well, actually, so the sequence of events is that when I graduated with my bachelor's degree, I knew that I wanted to pursue my education. And I was married, and we had a child on the way. And I knew that it would be important to get my education jump-started as soon as I could. And so following my bachelor's degree, I actually enrolled right away at the University of Houston. And so I did my master's degree immediately after my bachelor's degree. And that experience for me was, I had been so inspired by my collegiate directors. I just knew that I wanted one day to get a doctorate degree. And I knew that if that was going to happen, because I was starting my family, and certain things begin to happen once you get to that point, I needed to get my education jump started. And so with my supportive wife and a new baby in tow, we moved from Idaho to Houston, and I started teaching, I started studying with Dr. Charles Hausman at the time, and spent my 2 years working with him, and of course with Dr. Weber. And following that is when I got my first job teaching in the Houston area, actually for middle school. I taught 2 years of middle school and a year of high school in the Houston area, and moved back to Colorado and taught some high school in Colorado as well. And the whole experience was such a, it was such a long road, but along the way, I knew I wanted to be a choral conductor from my undergraduate. And I knew that the experience in the public school was going to be very valuable. And in some ways I missed that quite a bit. But I knew that I wanted to conduct. I probably knew I wanted to conduct when I was walking around my undergraduate campus, singing songs in my head and waving my arm as I was conducting in, the choir in my head. And somebody honked their horn on the street that I was walking on, and they made this funny gesture to me, like, "What are you doing?" And I was conducting. I was conducting the choir in my head, so I knew I wanted to be a conductor from very, very early on.
And it seems like so much of your life education has been wrapped up in singing in choirs. I mean, you've traveled all over the world, both with the children's chorus in Colorado, but also with the University of Houston Concert Chorale. You've been to competitions in Hungary and France, etc. So choral singing is at the very core of who you are.
It really is. And I often tell people, if I didn't do music, I don't know what else I would do.
Right.
My interests are really not in, I like to juggle and I like to ride a unicycle, but I don't think I want to go be a clown. So there's these like kind of funny hobbies that I enjoy doing. But yeah, I could never see myself, going to work in a cubicle. I could never see myself I just don't see any other option for me. I kind of feel like the career chose me,
Right.
and that I didn't necessarily pick the career, because there was never one moment where I had to sit and say, what is it that I want to do with my life? I was just in choir, like that's just what I did. And I had the opportunity to work with just amazing people, amazing conductors, and have some pretty outstanding experiences as a young child.
You obviously are wrapped up in music so much in every day. It's what you do. But what about listening to music that you're not going to use professionally? What do you listen to just for pleasure, for enjoyment, or do you?
You know, it's interesting because as I speak with a number of musicians, I often find a similar response to that question, and it's one that I tend to share, which is I don't listen to a whole lot for pleasure in terms of, in the car. I usually have some podcast on or some, or a lot of times it's just I drive in silence. I don't find that the car is a very great place to listen to any kind of music just because of all the road noise and, that kind of thing. And when I'm at home, I enjoy spending time with my family and being with them, and that's enough noise and enough sound as it is. And so we don't typically have my wife, my children, they have their playlists, and I really enjoy listening to their songs. But I can't really even tell you who's singing that song. I'm not really into pop music of any kind, or I enjoy it. I don't mind listening to it. I just I don't know the current sensations, I guess. So I just kind of stay to myself when I'm in my car or when I'm by myself, and I just think and meditate and pass my time that way.
When you were growing up, did you buy music for yourself? Did you buy CDs? You're a CD child. I'm an LP child. So,
That's right. Yeah, I remember going to the bookstore that also sold CDs, and you could buy them. I didn't do a whole lot of that. I do remember, however, two memories that come to mind with regard to that. My uncle, who has since passed away, I played percussion, and he took me to one of those stores that had just aisles and aisles of CDs and used CDs. And he bought me a CD of Inagata da Vida, and it has this amazing drum solo in there. And he just thought that I would love that. And I did love that. And I probably still have the CD. And every time I hear that piece, I think of my uncle who bought me that CD. And I also have a memory of going to the library myself, riding my bike over to the public library. And with my card, I checked out George Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue, and took that CD home and put it in my CD player. And I must have listened to that piece just over and over on repeat, nonstop. And it was, and I'm fascinated by that piece. It's just such a great piece. And so I do have memories of, seeking out music, but even as a child, I was so surrounded, with twice weekly rehearsals at the children's chorale. I was always just surrounded by wonderful music, and I never really felt at that time the need to go and seek out more of it.
Oh, right. I know what you mean about Rhapsody in Blue. It was somebody bought me when I was a child an LP that included that, and it was a revelation. It really was. And I, like you, listened to it over and over and over again as I was doing my homework each evening. Who then are your choral composing idols?
I love the music of Ivo Antonini. And I think I was mostly exposed to this from the University of Houston. Stephen Paulus, again, his music as well is just so lush, and I just find so much joy in singing it or conducting it. It can be so simple and yet so advanced at the same time. It's really intriguing that way. For one of my final recitals as a doctoral student at the University of Houston, we performed one of his pieces, and it was a real honor to. I had the opportunity to collaborate just a little bit, or correspond rather, with the poet of the piece, and to learn a little bit more about Paulus through the eyes of his own collaborator was wonderful.
Tell us about Antonini.
We got the opportunity to meet Antonini in Italy when we traveled there for the European Grand Prix. And he's published with a lot of publishing houses, but one in particular is Houston-based Alliance Publications. And it was so wonderful after having taught much of his music in the high school where I worked, and singing it as well in the concert chorale at the University of Houston. To finally get to meet him, he had traveled from Sweden across the border to come and hear one of our concerts where we were singing one of his pieces, and a very genuine person and such a lovely person.
And in terms of goals for your career, for yourself and your career from this point on, you've started teaching now at Briar Cliff University, as we said. And what would you like to do? What is on that sort of professional bucket list?
That is a great question. I always look to the future. I always think of, what do I want out of my career? And, there may be a few goals and aspirations that I kind of tuck away in my heart. And I think maybe one day that could be a possibility. For the time being, the position I have now is just such a great one for me. And it's so enjoyable.
Talking to you, it's quite obvious that for you, that choral experience and choral conducting, it's a vocation, isn't it?
It sure is. It sure is. And the passion to promote this by teaching the younger generations and by promulgating the choral vocation through younger voices and hopefully being able to inspire students like I was to follow a career in music and to make a difference in their own lives and in their own world is certainly something that has been given to me. The opportunity to work with the chamber choir, for example, that was somebody reaching out to me and saying, "Hey, I want to help you. I want to get you jump started. I want to learn from you. I want to teach you. I want to give you this opportunity." And so for me to be able to pass that on to somebody else or many other people in the future is definitely one of the reasons that I am so passionate about choral music.
And you said when you started at BYU, Idaho, you thought you were going to be a communication major, and then realized that it was music that you wanted to do. But really, it seems to me what really makes your heart sing is communication. It's the musical communication, but it's also the sort of the interpersonal communication that a choir brings.
I would have to agree with that, St. John. I think the opportunity to work with human beings and to learn from them and to grow with them, for me, music is the vehicle. But I always am thinking of the individual, of the person, of the student that needs a bike to be able to get around town, or the student whose father just passed away and needs an extra hug or an extra encouragement. These are opportunities. And you think about it, as choral conductors in education, we typically see some of the same students for 4 years at a time. They enter as freshmen, and then we get to see them grow, whether you're at a high school or a college or a middle school. They typically will enroll year after year, and you really have the opportunity to get to know people and get to know their families and understand them and encourage them and see them grow and see them become somebody that they wanted to become. And for me, that truly is a great passion of mine to reach out and to be with people and to encourage them and be their cheerleader.
It's almost like you're a guidance counselor.
It sure is. And isn't that true of so many educators around the world who are, every day going to school and they take the product that they're given and they see what they can do with it to make it a little bit better. And that product is a person, that is a human being that comes to your classroom with different struggles and with a different backpack, if you will, than any other student in the school. So there's so much that educators do for our world and for our communities, and it's just so important to reach out to individual people and try to help each individual person.
Look, Brian, it's been lovely to talk to you and to hear your story, and I'm so glad that the Houston Chamber Choir was able to give you so much in terms of your professional development and satisfy so much of your love for choral singing and choral conducting. Best wishes for the remainder of the semester and the academic year at Briar Cliff University. And thank you very much for joining us.
I appreciate this opportunity. Thank you to you, St. John, and to the Houston Chamber Choir.
Okay, stay safe. And thank you to everybody who supports the Houston Chamber Choir as a sponsor, as a patron, as a viewer. We appreciate all that you do to help us spread the word about choral music. I'm St. John Flynn. This is Behind the Music. Please join us again next time.
The Houston Chamber Choirs with One Accord is your one-stop shop for choral joy. If you enjoyed this podcast, help us to continue our mission to grow the esteem and appreciation of choral music by sharing, reviewing, and subscribing to our content. As a 501c3 nonprofit, support from listeners like you allows us to continue to create new and exciting programming. For more information about us and how you can support our work, please visit HoustonChamberChoir.org/give.